Were you trying to describe something about me spinning a web and having half decaf coffee? Oh. Series 93, 132, items 1 through... That's something, 56. Human progress is intellectual progress, and intellectual progress moves along by the following: addressing itself, redressing itself, and forever redefining its purpose and direction by way of intersystem cannibalism of the dreams and illusions that are its reality. Ordinary people attempting to explain human behavior by using themselves as an example explain nothing. Anything man can talk about, he can talk about some more. Thinking can be taught to run faster than its normal natural speed, but it will never fly. That is a possibility of another function altogether. Well, altogether in a manner of speaking. One father so advised his son, always preface your remarks by saying, I have no earthly idea what I'm about to say. Perhaps all of us should write that down. Oh, I did. Being civilized is like being on a train in a trance. An ordinary man can have no intellectual interests that are not biased, while a more conscious man is partial only to the truth and reality. Even a man with no religion and without rituals can develop his own unimportant, meaningless personal rituals, habits. Even a man with no religion and without rituals can develop his own important, meaningless personal habits. Criminal mythology for the commonly more conscious. The only killer worth considering is the cold-blooded one. And now some musical news. Speech is rhythm, words are tunes, minds are deserts, thoughts sand dunes. No. If you can snap your fingers and think at the same time, you may be onto something. After getting their attention, he said to those standing about him, we are all on separate missions, except that none of us are on a mission, and they all went home. One man became so neurally graceful that he couldn't think and talk about himself at the same time. Civilization makes everything not all right and then tells you that were it not for it, the not all right monster would eat you alive. A dog doesn't have to make itself eat. A man doesn't have to make himself think. A dog would have to make himself think, and a man has to bring himself into a full state of consciousness. Thank you, and bow wow. Never say back or again. You want to hear some more about justice with a capital J? Okay. Most of those who want to be mystics don't have what it takes to be mystics. That's with a J, like right after K. When stupidity and mental rigidity are recognized as man's natural condition, he can then skip even responding to questions regarding one's personal behavior with, I don't know. Another startling psychological breakthrough brought to you courtesy of the concerned research team here at New Intelligence on the Air. As our illustrious and revered founder so often said, it is my pleasure to be of service and to help you out. Which way did you come in? One man had embroidered on his upper inner thigh this inspiring reminder: thoughts are like relatives. Let them come for a visit and you'll never be rid of them. A dumb man alone is a misdemeanor. Two together, a felony. Local conditions cause you to think. Universal ones allow you to be more conscious. The lie of the century, to understate the case a bit. The lie of the century. Man cannot live by habit alone.
Yeah.
Thank you and Godspeed and good night, and be particularly careful driving home, lest you accidentally come to consciousness and suddenly become aware, whilst doing 90 miles a neural hour, that it is not you who's actually been doing the driving.
Yeah.
On Good Gracious Day and during certain other festive periods, local conditions would sometimes look at what it had done and hum to itself this little song. Yet and still I'll impose my will on all of those who have none. Say, who do you think he's referring to? Names don't matter, but I can tell you this. None can be intellectually dominated who have no intellect and concept of submission. And further on, none will mentally submit save those whose conscious activity is limited to merely thinking. The exhorting cry of civilization. Why have real orange juice when you can just as easily have fake? If not, in fact, it admits, why even bother to be civilized? There may well be no routine way out, but there's for damn sure not for those who think otherwise to begin with. Extraordinary activity such as this is only extraordinary in that it encourages men to do the extraordinary. A Homo sapiens' home is his body. A man's home is his head. Note. In this vast solar system, these are not the only two places a person can live. Just thinking is easy. Being intellectually focused and unbattered is unnatural and abnormal and must be cultivated with utmost attention, extreme intensity, and periodic infusions of good fortune. Those in a trance can teach none to dance. A more alert man should forever be raising the level of the field on which the game is played. There are no psychological causes, only psychological aftermaths, outcomes, and products. If man were not a two-part being, he'd be no being at all to speak of. Man, one man's poem about man. Man, we're born to physical paradise, then live in a mental dream. What a scheme, what a scheme. The cheerleader leaped before the crowd and cried out, "Let's hear it for man," but none could respond since they were all men. What a scheme indeed. The crowd dried out. Some useful love advice. You can always break a dead man's heart. Don't believe it? Just look at the operational relationships between men and their institutions. Intellectually speaking, you can only hurt a man after you've killed him. One guy told a bud, "You see, old chum, it's like this. Consciousness and mere thinking run on two different times, and consciousness runs mainly on no time." There's an unnoted communications network that directs all of life. How do birds fly together? How do men intellectually cohabitate? Our earthly pseudo-myth for the day. The reason local mystics like to push people around is because of how the truth has so shoved them about. Okay, a suborbital, more serious one. Thinking is passive and submissive, consciousness aggressive and domineering. One father so instructed his son, "Civilization eats its own," which is fair enough since civilization is its own. Again, herein is noted the neural distinction between murder and suicide, between stay-at-home, self-inflicted cannibalism, and a fine dining experience out with all of your best friends, mainly you, at some fresh and fascinating food emporium, mainly your own head. Make no mistake, to be seriously civilized is to live at least partially in a trance. In regard to items, including the last, which have made references to being seriously civilized or seriously religious or seriously political and so on, perhaps the liberating trick is not to be serious about any part of man's invented intellectual world. And driven by the accompanying high winds, a viewer makes this note: genes don't gossip and thoughts don't rock and roll. I see the wind died down. Most people live, if you want to call it that, under local conditions, while the more conscious are always on the move toward the universal. Actually, being more conscious is like being in a cult without having to be in a cult. Spurious and specious pseudo-sexual news. Women, having no sense of honor themselves, encourage it in men. Same as between hormones and neurons. Now do you get it? Quiz time. What is the fastest form of slow suicide? Taking any aspect of civilization seriously. Quiz time round number 2. Why do so many people believe that their particular culture is of specific pertinence and is the source of much of both their glory and their distress? Why? Because they're stupid. That's why. Hold up. I've just been handed an important announcement. Quiz time round 3. For as long as we can remember, why do men continue to take drugs and booze to be smarter when everyone knows it doesn't work? Now think about it. When everyone knows it doesn't work, and yet they continue to do it. In case I have to rewrite, drugs and booze it's got a blank space there. I think politics, education, religion. True consciousness is discovered afresh by each man again for the 4th time. 4th. One man's thinking said to his actual neural potential, "I wish you'd quit blaming me. I'm as sick of this as you are." Which, although the mind can say it, is not really true. A consciously provocative man cannot be mechanically provoked. One guy's latest definition is gossip. History for people in a hurry. "Daddy," said the laddie, "let's play How Come It Is?" And the elder nodded his acquiescence, so the son asked, "Daddy, how come it is that you can forget to be conscious but not forget to think?" And the elder nodded his acquiescence again. A viewer says, "Shit, we could talk about this forever." More signs of a viewer threatening to become more than just a viewer. Some gaming news. The reason that fake poker is more popular than real poker is that the fake form doesn't cost you anything. If simply being sick of yourself actually accounted for anything, then everyone would already be far beyond simply being sick of themselves. If you're not continually raising the bet, playing at the limit, and forever demanding an extended line of credit, then you're not really in the game. After the main casino has closed and the lights are out, the crowds have gone, and it's down to some down and grungy, hairy-handed poker for the big guys, then does unfettered consciousness's game with thinking become the one known as shoot the dealer. Although transgressions against society can be punished, men cannot be forced to be civilized. I knew you'd get it. Pure consciousness is always delighted to see itself, while thinking, when confronted with itself, usually says something like, "Geez, what is it now?" For many a more conscious man, the first 40 years were the foyer of his life. One would be Transcendental College's alma mater theme. When it comes to being more conscious, we'd rather think about it than do it. Well, wouldn't you? After all, one of the two is possible, my dear. Yay, yay, push 'em back, rah, rah, rah. Civilization wants you to take it seriously. That's why it makes you take it seriously. Once you are conscious, why even bother to flag down a bus? Or a particular thought? Or a traffic cop? How things work in the city. Only idiots give advice. And those idiots who know what they're doing will slap you around a bit first to soften you up so as to make it more likely that you'll take their idiot advice. Definition from the metro area. Institutions. Idiocy systematized. Hunger is a cry by the stomach of, feed me, as thinking is to the mind of, let's be more conscious. And several bystanders says, we knew that. Yeah, right. The folly of taking the totally contrived structure of civilization seriously can only be surpassed by doing likewise your own thoughts. Why be dazed when for the same price you can be amazed? And why live in a trance when you can learn to dance? In the everyday collective commercial world of man, a more conscious person is a singular salesman in that he shills only for life itself. One father smiled at his son and says, go on with your bad self and let the civilized do as they must. Through civilization, the local becomes disturbed. The universal remains pretty much unaffected by it all. Much like a more conscious man. When the knowing leave home, they go home. From last time, yes, that's right, last time, I made reference to another great Hollywood endeavor, the 3 Tons of Fun, if you recall. That probably no one has seen. I haven't heard of them since. But at any rate, and so you've had a few hours to consider why I drug it in the middle of something important. You know, if you remember our discussion of Green Acres, why I pulled in something obviously silly in the middle of a serious discussion. Did anyone consider, though, you recall what I was pointing out, that the whole theme of these guys were just 3 humongously large men, and the only plot was just 17 minutes or whatever it was, of the damage they did. But now, for you wondering why I brought it up, which I assume by now you know wasn't for a laugh, because I think I could have beat that personally. But can you consider the 3, and silent at that, remember, the 3 non-speaking tons of fun, the 3 guys, and then consider it in light of the havoc hormones bring upon the civilized world. Because you can look at these 3 tons of fun, especially being silent, but there they are that physically, hormonally, the damage, just everywhere they move in the ordinary civilized world. And I was making up one example of them applying for a bakery, which was all right, but consider, how about, now that I'm refining it just for a moment, how about they're walking down the street, these 3 guys, 600 pounds, waddling along, and a sign, let's say it's in a bank, which is a fine example of civilization. And they end up behind counters as 3 tellers. And for the next 16 minutes, and they don't speak, the whole thing is just, everybody else is doing ordinary things, coming in trying to make deposits. And they're trying to do ordinary things. One of them turns around. He can't get the drawer open to make change, And he does it, and he knocks it down, and he tries to turn sideways. You understand, they're so big that no matter what they do, they're knocking over ordinary people. The banker comes up to help, or another teller comes up to try and assist them, and they go, what? And without talking, but and they turn around, and they knock people down. They knock other people down. And it just builds slowly. At the end of the little short, is you see them waddling away. still having said nothing, and just, they're no worse off, no better off. They're just like the movie started. They were walking down this sidewalk to the bank is where it opened, and now 17 minutes later, they're on the same sidewalk, 20 feet away, walking out of sight as it fades away instead of the movie. But here, where the bank was, where they stopped and got a job, they became part of civilization for 17 short minutes. It is now nothing but dust and smoke, and the building is just absolutely demolished. And maybe one or two of the bankers, several people kind of stand there in a daze, and they're just waddling off. Huh? Several I pulled out, but something else hit the news that's hit common knowledge. It's nothing new, but it's just happened recently. It was announced that a philanthropist is donating, it was billions of dollars, just a staggering amount, to education. And I'm talking about serious, $1 billion. And he was pointing out the problems, the ills of society. And he was pointing out that what are we going to do that he's got that much money to give away? And if he's going to do something good, and we're going to cure some of these ills, violence, poverty, anything you want to name, anything that from a civilized view seems to be an ill, what are we going to do? So he points out education. So they have press conferences, and the president shakes his hand, and priests and politicians, and hear, what a great man. Everybody applauds. And now there's going to be opposition to it immediately. And the opposition is going to be on the basis that the money is not being spent in the right place. But it's also going to be on the basis that it should be spent in the area of the critic's interest. That is, somebody's going to say, well, that is very nice for Mr. X to give $1 billion to help society and civilization, but not to education. It should go into additional police work, more prisons. We don't need education, not going to cure it. So somebody's going to suggest building more prisons, beefing up the police of the country. Somebody else is going to pop up and say, well, it's a nice gesture, and I know he means well, but that is not the place to do it. That what we should be doing is taking that kind of money and devoting it to the actual treatment of the people who are already committing or have committed offenses. That is, psychiatric work, social work. But there's one thing that will not be noted. We have not changed the subject. Why do I keep having to point that out? I don't know. Just killing time, trying to think of what I'm going to say next. I just keep trying to encourage, maybe I don't have to, that all the waves, we apparently jump from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, sometimes to the White Sea, which is very chilly. But notice, the waves just, they can get everywhere except the Baltic. I don't ever use the Baltic as an allegory. Yes, I do. You just don't understand. It has underground ways that they get from the North Sea into the Baltic, but don't worry about it. What will not be pointed out? You do understand, it would have, one more time, what I guess should be obvious to many of you by now, that there stands a man out of nowhere, asking for nothing. They say, here he is, an important announcement, philanthropist X, Mr. So-and-so, and he says, I am donating right now, setting up a new foundation, $1 billion to further education in this country. And you would think, well, boy, that's nice, and at least there's some good news, or there's some news sans controversy for a change. And it's not true. If he made that announcement at 12 o'clock today, by 3 or 4 o'clock, somebody had already gotten their press secretary, their PR department, to already churn out a press release saying, I know he means well, but my God, to waste that kind of money on education when it should be in more prisons. So, by now you should not be shocked at that. What would appear to be the most innocuous, the most humane, the most decent, the most righteous suggestion, idea, theory, etc., presented, if it's going to live, if it's not going to be stillborn, if it's going to live, it's going to be kicked around. It's going to be opposed. No matter what it is. It's why the truth, why point blank reality, I'm about to get to this, but I can't resist throwing in right now, it's why point blank reality is not a public commodity. Because nobody can oppose it. All they can do is go. That means it's like you didn't hear it. About to get to it. But anything else is going to be opposed. So there will be all sorts of opposition, and this is not really the point, but this is the point that they would depend on. It's going to be on the basis that everyone who opposes it, every critic of it, will have an alternative. And they will have a vested interest. That's their excuse. That's not an attack on, that will be their excuse. I'm going to do it again, because we're right at the heart of the way the mind works individually and collectively. If I say, all right, Mr. X is donating $1 billion to help society, to help humanity. Very good. He is donating it directly to, earmarking it specifically for education. And I'm playing both parts, and somebody says, not just one person, but many people, but one guy will have to stand up and go, no, geez. Why didn't they check with me? Why didn't he consult with me? That is not going to cure the kind of ills he's talking about. What we need is more police on the street, more prisons. Now, it would sound like, you might say, well, come on. The man's giving the money. Don't start worrying about the details. He's trying to help things. And then he could say that he thought I said, when I said, well, everybody that's going to oppose anything has got a vested interest. Then if you're an ordinary cynic, just a walking down the sidewalk smartass, you'd go, oh, I bet you're right. And sure enough, it'd turn out that at the very least the guy would be somewhere in the either the judicial system, the police functions of the state. He would, in some way, you understand, he would have some interest. He'd be in construction, specializing in building prisons. Or he could just be a public activist that has made his reputation on the basis that we do not have enough police enforcement of our laws, and we coddle criminals, and we shouldn't be treating them so nicely and give them psychological counseling. What we should be doing is beating them with whips like God intended. And so you'd find out, hey, he does have a vested interest. And then you could try to excuse away the opposition. You don't understand, though. When I say they had a vested interest, that wasn't an attack. I'm trying to show you they'd use that as an excuse of how they could dismiss opposition. Well, wait a minute. We can't take this guy's his complaint about the money going for education, but he wants to do it, what? Prisons? Do you know that man's an attorney? That explains it. Never mind. That wasn't an excuse on the part of the opposition, the man criticizing. It's an excuse on everybody else to ignore the opposition and to ignore the fact that I'm getting to, that is, that nothing works. So that's what I'm getting to, of course. Don't say of course. All right. Yeah, but back when I said don't say. Is anyone listening? There will be opposition to anything alive, but here's one. Large sums of money, somebody attempting to do good, to help society, to help civilization. Because it's not just this society. It helps humanity, and as you know by now, I've been just calling it civilization in general, the intellectual, the singular world of man. Because he's not devoting the money to help the redwood forest or any forest. He's not doing it to help the beaver population. He's not doing it to help any animals. He's not helping to, he didn't donate it to help reforest the strip mines in Appalachia. He did it for man, the singular world of man, which is civilization. There will be all sorts of opposition to what he described as education is the only way that we can go about beginning to cure these ills. And he can explain it. You can do it as fast as I can make it up, whatever he said. I'm just making it up, but we know what he said. It was something like, well, what are we going to do? We're going to have to take children at a young age. We cannot continue to have to treat after the fact. Once they begin to run amok and act uncivilized, we've got to get them now. We've got to improve education. We've got to give them nice food at school. We've got to give them an environment if they do not have a good, comforting, supportive one at home. You say, well. So, any opposition that comes along will be dismissed by those in favor of this approach by saying, well, these people have a vested interest. And there will be several, from several directions, there will be opposition. I just made up several that somebody say, no, we should have more, be spending on police. We should be spending it on social programs. We should be spending on health programs as opposed to education. There's one opposition you will not hear. Not here. And it's the only opposition, if you want to call it that, you'll see what I'm getting at, that is come clean. That is telling. That is the truth. The only opposition would be to point out. Now, we're accepting their premise, which that's understandable, that society, civilization is not perfect. You just can't argue with that because civilization is the one that makes people say that. Well, I'm just taking what they point out. We've got people still murdering each other, and that's not civilized. What are you going to say? We've got people stealing from one another. We've got people walking around who are not civilized, whether they create physical havoc by killing and murdering or not. They're illiterate. They do not know anything. They're just walking bodies. They're not civilized. We've got to do something. We've got to keep progress going. So, one man suggests, puts up money, that to help the ills, to help the flaws of civilization, we need to work on education, and here's the money. Then we have people come along and say, well, the money is certainly useful and could be utilized better, however, in such and such area. This area, that area, that area. That will be the opposition. That's just part of the tango. They're going to dance about it. Here's the opposition you will not hear. The one that I said would be the clean-cut opposition, if you want to call it opposition. And that would be someone to point out to all of them. To the man that picked out civil, to education, to those that oppose it and picked out something else, is to point out the money is a waste of time. It's not going to cure anything. That's the fact. That is a simple fact. It's not sarcasm. It's not cynicism. It's a simple fact. And you could take them one by one, which if you understood anything, if you understood that, you wouldn't do it. But for you to give you a little something more to go on, perhaps, you start education. How stupid. You're blind. You will not look at reality. Pouring money in education is not going to cure what you call the ills of civilization. But putting money over here in prisons, putting money in social programs, putting money in a hat. The only opposition, if you want to call it that, which is a waste of time and serves no purpose, would be to say, it's all a waste of time. That will not work. But are you going to hear that? No. If you did hear it, what would it prove? Nothing. If it was announced, if somebody, which I'm really stretching the reality of civilization because it wouldn't, but if some respected person, well, let's say the President of the United States, or a famous religious leader, well, the President, I guess, would be good, or the Secretary of Education, they're there on the White House, or they announce this, the money to education, and then 30 minutes later, the Secretary of Education, somebody, a decent person, whoever it is, person's been appointed to a cabinet position, they call a press conference, they announce this was very nice of Mr. X to donate this money, but I would like to point out that increasing the budget for education, increasing education itself, the flaws of society, crime, poverty, social unrest, whatever, education, putting money into it, whether it's $1 or $1 billion, is not going to help at all. Thank you. That's my opinion. And you would, anything normally, I assume let's assume it did make the nightly news, because somebody of a cabinet position that calls a press conference, especially in the wake of somebody an hour earlier donating $1 billion, for them to say that, you think, boy, now we're talking about serious news. Still assuming the person was not the Secretary of Education, not foaming at the mouth, and apparently about to come apart, it actually stands there and says, blah, 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 stands there at the podium, makes an announcement, says thank you. And who would remember it? If it did make the news, at first everybody would go, my God, the Secretary, Dr. So-and-so has lost his or her mind. I think I'll turn down the furnace. Let's see what's on the other channel. And the next day, they might talk about that night, and somebody say, well, did she come apart or him apart? Is she in the hospital by now? Did you see that? Yeah. Well, now, I was in his office later that afternoon doing some business, and everything seemed fine. It's like that. It would almost be as though it was a silent conspiracy, kind of a variation of Green Acres turned inside out, that by the next day, just given the facts as I'm giving them to you, it was like it never happened. Nobody would ever mention it again. If she didn't or he didn't, the Secretary of Education never mentioned it, that is not the way life works. It's not supposed to work. But now back to us, people interested in such as this. Again, taking just, I'm not criticizing, nor should you, that serves no purpose, but taking the ordinary view that there are things in man's life that are not perfect, out there, civilization, murder, for instance. And I point out to you, which assuming that you're following what I'm saying, that increasing education, anything you want to do with education, I say keep increasing the money and the education. And under education, fill in anything you want to, as long as, in short, any kind of education, how they do education, whatever you mean by education, as far as curing so-called ills of civilization, that will not do it. It simply won't. But nothing else either will. So what are you going to do? If you're following this, I know I'm skipping sometimes fast. If you're following what I'm saying, sans any criticism, all it is a point blank facing of reality. And it's not a negative view of reality. It is a view that life never stops at the intellectual level, at the civilized level. It is always, quote, imperfect. If it wasn't, what the hell would you have to get up for tomorrow? You individually, civilization collectively. Nothing. We'd all be fat, 40, laying on our backs, burping, illiterate. You know, if the batteries ran out on the remote control, I guess we'd die. And by then, most men, if their wife didn't come over and actually pull down their doors and make them, by that age, make them do it. I don't know what happened to sex. As long as they get the phone, I guess they'd call for a pizza. You follow the point. If it's back the hormonal level, it doesn't matter. If we were forced back to regress to just that level, then all of this is moot anyway. But as long as it's not back to that level, and we're operating at the civilized level, there is no such thing as perfection. There's no such thing as satisfaction. It was in here, it didn't seem to get much of a response. I didn't pull it out, but it was pointing out that, and it was a little, supposed to get your attention. It said that the cry of a stomach, the cry of hunger is a stomach saying, feed me. Which at first you will go, well, what the hell? Anybody knows that. But it's the same as the mind saying, let's be more conscious. The stomach says, feed me. The cry of hunger is the stomach saying, feed me. Now, if I just it there, and I did write, I think, either a serious semicolon or a long dash for a pause. But if you just thought about that, you go, what the hell's the point of that? Or that's self-evident to the point that it's self-nothing. The cry of hunger, yes, is the stomach saying, now watch this brilliance of your stomach. It's hungry, and your stomach, you know, it thinks, it writes, it plots, it goes to school, it furthers its education, it becomes literate so it can communicate. So the day finally comes, through great work on its own educational level and its own perception, when hunger strikes, your stomach now says, feed me. You understand the little dramatic, the theatrical sarcasm? Like, well, Jesus, what else is it going to do? Right, nothing. Because that's all it takes. You feed your stomach and you're not hungry. Likewise, the mind says, with hunger, let's be more conscious. More conscious. Now it can say, let's be intellectually fulfilled, period. It's not possible. In fact, if anybody thinks they are, it's not normally couched in these terms, but if they think they are, and they seriously push the matter, they are adjudicated to be, because it's just one step from that to, I am God. Yes, I know everything. Yes, that's right, everything. But I don't want to talk about it, you know. Some of you might disagree with me. In other words, an absolute raving maniac, a fanatic going, yes, I know it all. No. So there is no such thing as, quote, perfection. It's why it's foolish to argue, and I was not arguing, with anybody's definition, ordinary people's definition of the flaws of society. Which is silly to argue with it anyway. You can't naysay it to say, well, we shouldn't have murders. Which anybody knows anything, mostly, I don't care whether people murder each other as long as they don't murder somebody I know or me. Other than that, who cares? It's like only the dumb care about what happens to the dumb, for those of you that really enjoyed that one several nights ago. I know it makes all you people with Mother Teresa's photograph still in your billfold a bit, I don't know, edgy. But well, you should, because carrying that around, if justice prevails, should give you eventually leprosy. At least on that one spot where you got your billfold. I'm being funny. It should give it to you up here. The flaws of society, of civilization. I keep saying society, not. I'm being affected by the habit of what ordinary people say, but I am still referring to civilization as I've been calling it. The flaws cannot be cured because they're not supposed to be cured, because from the view that they are an open end for humanity to grow, they are not actually flaws. Again, assuming that the murderers and those creating flaws do not flaw on you or yours. That's another story. It's like, hey, watch it. Nothing works. Back to the serious man there who can afford it to give $1 billion for no reason. Sure, he got his name in the paper, but we've heard his name before. For no reason. He just got so much money, he is so old, there's nothing else to do with it, and he looks around, and I want to help. And he said he thought about it. He probably checked with people, anyway, he thought about it. And what are we going to do besides put it in education? And I can point out, let's assume that you can see it. That's right, it's not going to cure anything. Nothing. And not being sarcastic, we don't have to go into details about, well, the majority of it will end up paying for salaries of bureaucrats and hangers-on. It doesn't matter. All of that's a cheap way out. That's the same way as saying, well, opponents of it have a vested interest. Yeah, they do, but you got it backwards to say, aha, that explains them away. That's what explains away you not understanding it. I know that one's a bit viscid.
Yeah.
Nothing works. Education will not work. Nothing else will work. Putting the money in anything will not work. Now, we got a question, though. Some of you can see that. Sans any bias, prejudice, emotion on your part, you simply say, well, that's the way it is. It's not going to cure one thing. Not any of the ills that he can delineate, him or any of his committee says, here's what we decide are the major problems facing civilization today. And they state them. And you have to go, well, that's true. It will not cure any of them. But neither will anything else. That if I sit up and say, wait a minute, education's not going to do it, and in some way I could hypnotize him or work some kind of magic and him go, my God, you're right. Thank God you showed up. I didn't realize that. I'm wasting my money putting in education. You are correct. Talking to me, finally, getting some respect. And he says, tell me, oh wise one, where should I put it? Then I'd be sorry I stood up, because to carry along with my little made-up scenario, I got him going that far in the press, and everybody says, who is that man? Who is he? And he says, tell me where to put it. And I got to tell him the real truth, like, well, you might as well leave it there, because, you said it wasn't doing good there. Yeah? Well, where should I put it to doing good? I'll leave it there. It's not just being humorous. I'm asking you now, consider that you do follow what I'm saying. So what if you were standing there? Now really, this has a point. That really pictured that you were in that position that you could stand up and get the man's attention. Civilization attention, go, wait a minute, you're devoting all of these resources, all this effort in area X, education, penal reform, anything, penal implants for all I know. And you point, let's make it back to the easy one, that you point out to this philanthropist that this is not going to work, and you make him see, he goes, yeah, you're right. What should I do with it? Now I'm asking you. Now we're working real fast as always when we get down at the end. That's why it's fun. That is, however, my opinion, I guess. That we're doing it back and forth real fast from literal to allegory, which is the same thing. It will not. Nothing will work, since they're not flaws, but at any rate, what appears to be things that would be better off us being without: murder, money poured to education, anything in education is not going to change it. Neither will penal reform. Neither will more prisons. It simply will not. That's a fact. So then, they're trying to run simultaneously now, allegorically, just in you, and then taking this situation as I'm describing it. And if the man said, all right, where should I put it? Anybody can understand what you understood? You tell me, what should I do with it? And he's open. He's standing there saying, I will. I'll tear it. Won't go to education. The question is, where would you put it just on that level? If you were just out there in the ordinary, everyday, horizontal world, and you were faced, they said, well, you tell us where to put it. What would you do to improve, to, quote, improve civilization? I'm going to be theatrical for a second. As I was going to pause and take a sip of the gin, the coffee. That if nothing works, that if things are not flawed in the sense that they can be cured, and yet people in society, they're in civilization, the man stands there and he says, I'm going to give $1 billion. I've already decided, but you have, sir, you have made me understand right here in this press conference that doing it in education is not going to accomplish what I had in mind. You tell me. And if you hesitate and say, well, I'm not sure, I'm the one to tell you. And he said, listen, I've got the check here. I've already made allowances with the bookkeeper. I've already set up the legal arrangements for the foundation. $1 billion is going into a charitable endeavor to help our society, civilization. You tell me, it's going somewhere. Now you made me see right there that education is not going to do what I had in mind. But it's going somewhere, whether you speak up now or not. So there you stand again, and they wait. Now just at that level, that ordinary level, what is to be done? One more time, even though I say this can't be changed, we would still admit. I'm just saying from any ordinary view, from passing myself off as a regular earthling, that, hey, murder is not a good thing. Okay? Where would you put this man's $1 billion? He's standing, he says, it's going somewhere. Either speak up, or maybe I'll stick it back in education, or I'll just close my thing and stick my finger in the phone book and give it to somebody. But let's do the best we can. What would you do? Now for what I hope would be the real fun. Now take another second. Think about it. I'm assuming, without having to take a vote, that you understand what I'm asking. That since nothing can be done, if you had another person there and they just turned to you. Now we're about to slide right from literal to the seriously symbolic or allegorical. That there's somebody standing, he says, I got to check here. This $1 billion is going to some effort. If it's not education, you tell me. And if you don't tell me anything, I may just put it there anyway, even though you've convinced me. You made me see that will not accomplish what I wanted. What is to be done with what seems to be the continuing shortcomings, the flaws, the missteps, the dangers of civilization? Well, do you want to try this then? See, I'm sort of letting this one go off with you. Drive home with it safely. I mean, there's more to it, but I'm going to let it sort of slide so we can get into the more directly personal and symbolic. The real, in other words. The practical. Since out there, and out there is out there, whether you want to call it civilization, society, your family, your culture, anything. If it's outside your brain, it's out there. Since there is nothing to be done out there, then you've got the real question, a few people. Something can be done in here. But you're back to the same question I just presented between you and philanthropist X. Because I'm sure, but now all of you immediately agreed to that last sentence when I said, since nothing can be done out there, dash, then there's the problem, the situation, the possibility. The question is, what is to be done in here where it's possible? And I'm sure many people, oh yes. Talking heavy mysticism, transcendental approaches, allegorical attitude toward human existence. Call it anything you want to. But you can go back now to the original external example, even if you got it now internal, and you do agree, or at least pay your mental and verbal lip service that, yeah, you're right, out there by and large. Screw by and large. Okay, out there, it doesn't matter what there's nothing to be done. Now, you're speaking for you, or I'm speaking for you. We're talking about, there's a man, he can give $1 billion, back to the point, this man can give $1 billion and is not going to change, it's not going to cure, it's not going to stop. What he points out are the faults of civilization. The sane, ordinary murder is not stopping. So, in that sense, nothing can be done to change out there. Doesn't matter where you put the money, doesn't matter what the amount of money is, it's not going to change it. That is, of you being in one place, or him, a person doing something. Then the question is, well, wait, if there's something to be done, then it's in here with me. Aha! Thinks would-be mystics. Aha! Aha, your mother's socks. Because then this question still is, that's all ordinary people want to do that want to play mystic. Aha! That's right. Nothing to be done out there. It's all in here. Well, good night. Thanks a lot. Come again. It's like end of sermon. That's all they wanted to hear is back to what they already knew. Oh, that's true. Oh, boy. Amen, or whatever mystics say. I guess Southern mystics might say amen, or California mystics, right on, right on. And it sounds as though something's been accomplished. That someone got you from thinking, how can I help the world? How can I change the ungodly, the unmystical, the uncivilized aspects of the world out there? And you simply point out to me that it can't be done, that there's only one thing that can be done, and that's for a man to change himself. Whew. Boy, I'm glad I came here. Is that all? Because you do assume that's all. That's supposed to be the end of the night. Well, thank you. Good night. That's why I was doing all that. That's all people want to hear. At best. Of course, ordinary people can't even hear that. It's not matter whether they want to or not. Ordinary people can't hear that because that's akin to the Secretary of Labor, Education saying, it's nice for him to offer $1 billion, but it's not going to do any good. Hey, Joe, you gonna where are you going to eat later when this press conference is over? It's not whether they like it or not. It's like it does not compute. It does not register. Saying that nothing helps out there, it doesn't register. But them saying, aha. But then you point out that the only place possible to make a change is in here. Now, ha ha, now we got something. Anything past that doesn't register. They're ready to go. Where'd you say we were going to eat after this is over? Because the question then is, people take that as a major breakthrough. The people say, well, it took me 40, 50 years to get the point to understand that I am wasting my time trying to change life out there, trying to make my family straighten up, trying to make the Republican Party, get its act together, trying to make my country here of Ireland, come to its senses. Of course, I already point out, all they're doing is, the hormones are wearing out and they got no sex drive and they're just dying. But at any rate, they say, yeah, I see. Now that I'm older and wiser, I see that really, one poor man like myself, cannot seem to really have any effect on the world out there. But what is it you just said? Well, I said, since you can't, then the question is, what are you going to do in here? I've been thinking that same thing. I am glad I came here tonight and saw this because, by God, that's what I've been thinking lately. That's what a person's got to do is, that's all they can do is work on themselves. Now I see it clearly now. Thank you, Johnny Nash. And then they're ready to go. But if I was the black-hearted son of a bitch that I am, I would say, wait a minute, hey, come here. And I'd want to grab them and say, what do you mean? You spent 40 or 50 years disregarding the fact you're dying, and you're just getting old, but now you're trying to tell me that you now feel wiser, on the verge of great insight. Because you say that, yes, now I see there's nothing to be done out here. The only possibility is to do something in here. Where the hell do you think you're going? That's not the end of it. By then, their minds are already turned off if I didn't scare the shit out of them. They're already thinking, where can I eat? Where's the restaurant? What's open? Because the question then is, back the same question as I was presenting to you rhetorically, if the man said, here's the $1 billion, you tell me where to put it. The question is now, even if you see, oh, wait a minute, out here is not my problem. It's nobody's problem. Out here, I'm not going to be making any changes. It don't want to be changed. It doesn't need to be changed, although it needs everyone else to think it needs changing and for them to try. Because it does gradually change, but not because of him. Not because of him, and not because of me. So the only possibility is in here. Right. But don't leave. Come back here, you ignorant son of a bitch. You what else can I call them? You drugstore mystic. Come here. We're still left with the question now, even though you've agreed, even though you think it's a major breakthrough. That now you understand, wait a minute, the only thing possible, the only possibility of a change is for me to work on me in here. But don't leave it. All right, now you got the blank check. Where are you going to spend it? I told you I wanted to leave. When do you let me leave? There's got to be a restaurant open around here somewhere. Jesus. It's not that late.